Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show, the 29th of October. John, we're running out of October days, aren't we?
Thank goodness. We're getting a little bit closer to Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is. And matter of fact, before we get into the top three, the SNAP benefits, you know what SNAP is, don't you, right?
Did we discuss this in detail on Monday?
Yes. Okay. But
Okay.
Just want to make sure we're on the same page. Okay. There's a clip that's spinning around on the internet, which is kind of funny. It's a guy looking into his camera. It's on TikTok, of course. A guy looking into his camera with much concern because of the fact that he's talking about his budget. And he's saying that since his SNAP benefits are running out, he may have to go into his marijuana money to eat. And therefore, he won't be high anymore, and he doesn't know if he can handle this government shutdown anymore because he's going to have to spend his marijuana money on food.
I think there's the metaphor there of the old cliche of a recession is when your neighbor loses their job, a depression is when you lose your job.
Yeah.
Maybe like hard economic times are when your neighbor can't smoke weed. And a real SNAP crisis is when you can't smoke.
Right. Okay. That is John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. Every single day of his life, he puts together this incredible website called johncombest.com. Imagine that. JOHNCOMBEST.com on the end. What is it? It's a site where you find out all sorts of different things. Matter of fact, did you see that screenshot I sent you, which listed you as the #1 site in the state of Missouri for news? Remember I sent you that? Did you see that? I sent that to you?
I did. Yeah, I put no faith or value in that. It's probably some data slop. And I think a lot of morons would probably see something like that about their own website and probably post it on social media and tout how great they are. And then there's people that actually do work and they put their head down and they do the work and they don't say, hey, some AI slop website named me the best Missouri political news website.
So you're not taking the compliment. Is that what you're telling me? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, if it was a sincere, genuine compliment, like, hey, John, most influential people in Missouri start their day by going to your website, I'd say, yes, that's a fact, and thank you.
John?
But some AI slop data thing that says on the top RSS feed, that's nice, Brad. Send me more AI crap.
Remember how the very first time I heard about you, Shelley Barr came back from a Chamber of Commerce meeting and she said, Brad, I learned about this important website that anybody who wants to know that goes on in the state of Missouri needs to go to johncombest.com. And my response was, John Combest, who the hell's that? Remember that?
Yeah, and that said more about you than it said about my website, right, Brad?
Well, there's not much to say about me. But you know who there is to say about you, John? You know who there is?
Who is that?
It's Casey Kasem.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he starts off with...
In third place...
A terrific story out of Columbia today. We're going to talk 2 stories today. The first 2 stories we'll talk about are kind of good government stories. And you can make an argument that the third story is a good government one, too. We're going to start at number 3 with State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick. Now, Scott Fitzpatrick does something that I don't think a lot of auditors will do. He comes out and says, you know what? The things our office does are not very exciting. And he and his team started what's called, quote, the world's greatest audit podcast. Brad, by any stroke, have you heard anything about this podcast?
I have not. So that means in John Combest parlance, that's actually a good thing then, right?
Yeah, probably, Brad. Now, here's the thing. It started the woman who wrote this piece is named, hold on, I want to make sure I get their, oh, I'm sorry, it's a gentleman, Tyler Kerwan from the Columbia Missourian starts off. If a podcast episode titled, quote, The Audit of Ray County and the Mystery of the 76 Hams seems worth listening to, then Missouri State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick has succeeded. Unbeknownst to many, quote, the world's greatest audit podcast, end quote, is recorded here in the Show Me State. And here's a quote I love from Fitzpatrick. Well, it's a low bar. He has a real sense of humor about this. I mean, it is probably it is definitely the world's greatest audit podcast. And Scott's right. I mean, the bar is probably pretty low. Fitzpatrick goes on to say, we put out 100 and something audit reports a year. Most people are not going to read those. The podcast is a way to reach people who don't want to read audit reports. You can click on it, listen to it while you're driving. And Brad, when Scott and the team launched this podcast I believe it was a few months ago, they did a video series where they went around asking people if the folks would be interested in an audit podcast. And they used a lot of unedited clips where people were like, no, that sounds really boring and I would not listen to it. And then you got some gems from folks who confirmed that, okay, there might be some elements that might be interesting. So this reporter in Colombia goes through the idea of, why would you do something like this? Well, it's to highlight the stuff that is unsexy, the stuff that's not particularly, you're not going to sit down like Fitzpatrick says and actually page through an audit. But if you're able to pull out a few gems from some of these audits, you might draw a few more eyeballs to it. The reporter also goes into talking about more local issues and local audits. One of the Randolph County Sheriff's Department that identified $222,000 that had been misused. Some of the money was used to buy toys for kids, but about 10 grand was used for lodging at Margaritaville Resort. And as a final gem, let's get to those 76 hams. As for the case of the missing 76 hams, the audit office doesn't have an exact answer on where the hams went. According to the first episode of the podcast, they believe the former sheriff gifted the hams, bought with inmate commissary funds, to other sheriff's office employees. So I love this story, Brad. And I looked this morning, I wasn't able to grab it quickly enough to send it to you. But some of the promo videos that Scott's team did are just fantastic. They quote Trevor Fox in here, who's a veteran communicator here in the state of Missouri. And I just love this story so much. In fact, I linked today on johncombest.com. You can click on a link and subscribe on Apple Podcasts so that you get them all sent directly to your phone.
So what you're saying is the state auditor has a sense of humor.
That's exactly right, Brad. And, you can see that from a lot of the things that Fitzpatrick has done over the years. You would appreciate this story, Brad. He got into government because he built a business that, if I recall correctly, they did a lot of boat lifts. I believe he's from Table Rock. He's from Shell Knob. So I believe it was on Table Rock Lake. And he built a business that did boat lifts, I believe, and worked on docks. It's something to that effect. And he was so frustrated, he says, with dealing with state government. He said that every turn, somebody was looking for a different type of permit, and somebody was saying that he could do this and he couldn't do that. And he got so frustrated with it that by the age of 24, which is the minimum that you have to be a state representative, he actually ran for office. And so this is one of those guys that actually did something in the private sector and then decided to make a career out of it. And here's his quote. After getting into business and becoming a taxpayer and dealing with different bureaucracies, it seemed like every day I really started to get frustrated with government. So anyway, that's the type of story that will tug at a Brad Hildebrand heartstring.
John, I could tell you stories. And the interesting thing about that is I would imagine he's talking about his boat business. He's got numerous jurisdictions there. He probably has the county, which is saying one thing. Then he's dealing with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources since he's on a lake. And he's probably...
Yeah.
And he's probably dealing with the feds because of the fact that, remember, Obama declared all the navigable waters, even they're like in a puddle in your backyard, if you can put a toy boat in and you can go from one side to the other, that's navigable waters. I see, that's what's crazy about this kind of stuff. Man, I go through that all the time. It's so frustrating. It's just, he's my hero now, if that's his real thing. But yet, I bet you if I go down to the auditor's office and I tell him I wanted to, do something, okay, fill out this form and come back in 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying, John?
I disagree. First of all, no one in Scott Fitzpatrick's office talks like a mouth-breathing knuckle dragger. Okay, so I want you to take that back. Secondly, unwittingly, you led really nicely in the story number 2. Let's get to it, Brad.
John, it wasn't unwittingly. It was my ESP.
Up a notch to
ESPN,
number
more
2.
specifically.
Casey just said up a notch number 2.
Okay. From MissouriNet, veteran reporter Marshall Griffin. How the Missouri Department of Revenue utilizes artificial intelligence. Now, Brad, if you could do this in less than 60 seconds, can you tell us why you hop in one of your old decrepit vehicles and head west on 70 to Jeff City when you need paperwork done?
Well, because of the fact that it's so much more efficient. I gave the example earlier that I went down, the most recent time I went down to get not one but 2 sets of license plates and get my real ID. And from the time I walked in the building to the time I walked out on 2 different floors of the Truman Building, I was in for 10 minutes. If I were to go into a local license bureau, it would have been 10 days, John, 10 days.
It absolutely would have. Way to go, Brad. That took you exactly 17 seconds. I have my stopwatch running on my phone. Way to go, Brad. Now, I will point out that not only does the Missouri Department of Revenue offer in-person concierge services in Jeff City for the Brad Hildebrands in the world, but they are now adding AI. I should say they're building on their existing AI capabilities and their name of their AI assistant. Dora. That's right. Get it, Brad? D-O-R. And then you add an A on it. You got a little spicy Latina that can help you with some of your paperwork. Anyone who's logged on to the Missouri Department of Revenue's website has most likely met, quote, Dora, Joe Don Cheney, Strategy and Communications Director for the Missouri Department of Revenue, introduces us to Dora. And then the quote from Joe Don. Dora is a chatbot that was instituted a few years ago with the Department of Revenue. The intent was to benefit customers and to be able to provide information in a more timely fashion based on their schedule. Now, that's the end of the quote there. Now, everybody has used a chatbot. Brad, I used one of them yesterday with my bank. And the guy said, yeah, you should stop dealing with Brad Hildebrand. But I used a chatbot yesterday. And this is pretty common in the private sector. But it goes to show that there's a lot of things that have been innovations that have been helpful in the private sector that haven't always been applied right away to state government. In fact, if you go back to the story in number 3 in the Columbia Missourian, Scott Fitzpatrick tells the story of actually getting into the treasurer's office and actually getting into the auditor's office and being like, what? This is the kind of technology we have? We can't even do our job with this type of tech. Anyway, back to story number 2. Dora is an upgrade. I believe in May, Joe Don says that in May, they upgraded the Dora chat. Yeah, Dora was upgraded to be a generative AI system in May of this year. Now, Joe Don does a good job of saying, he doesn't use these words, but what he's saying is, remember with AI, it's garbage in and garbage out. So if you provide incorrect information to an AI chatbot or you describe a situation incorrectly, let's stereotype here, Brad. Let's say maybe a boomer gets on and gives some incorrect information. The AI chatbot is going to spit something out that's not 100% accurate. And there's always a way for you to go directly to the Missouri Department of Revenue and speak with someone, actually have a conversation. They can use an AI generated operator even if you want to accelerate or elevate your question or complaint. So anyway, to me, Brad, this is another feel-good story that shows that the public sector is catching up with the private sector in terms of AI.
If I'm not mistaken, John, when I called DOR a couple years ago, I believe the lady who answered the phone called herself Dora back then. Would that make sense?
Yeah, it would. It has been around for a while, Brad. You're right about that.
Yeah, because I believe, I believe it was like, hi, I'm Dora, and people, if you don't get the thing, Dora, Department of Revenue with the A after it, D-O-R-A, right? If you don't get that. But anyway, I see, at least it's not, hi, thank you for calling. Listen closely so our menu has changed.
At least it's not something
Right.
rote. Now, I sent a note to DOR, and I gave him your phone number, Brad. I give my phone number out on the air. I don't care. It's 314-280-8880. You call me at 3 a.m., I'll answer it. I gave them your number, And I said they have a special assistant that answers when you call. You know who that is?
Butthead?
No, Brad, don't be so crass. It's Department of Revenue Kid.
Department of Revenue Kid. Okay. And
yeah, they just have Dork answer the phone.
Thank you so much, John. Time for number one.
The number one
headline from the Post-Dispatch's Kurt Erickson. Wentzville lawmaker planning run for tax collector in St. Charles County. A woman we've talked about on this show in a positive light. State Rep Tricia Byrnes of Wentzville. She's a two-term state lawmaker, and she's leaving office to run for St. Charles County Collector of Revenue. Now, we've spoken of her in a positive light because she has been one of the leading advocates for the Radioactive Exposure Compensation Act, aka RECA. And she's been a leader on that, some would say, from the very beginning. And Tricia says that she's running for St. Charles County Collector. She, quote, respects the work of the current office holder. By the way, Brad, that's a woman named Michelle McBride. Back to Tricia's quote. She has run the office competently, but I believe leadership in this position can go further. We can be a voice for solutions that ease the burden on families, including, wait for it, Brad, exploring property tax freezes and other fiscally responsible tax relief strategies. End of quote. So Michelle McBride, for her part, she's from St. Peter's. She says she's planning to run for a 6th term next year. She says, quote, I totally enjoy this job. I didn't get into it for the politics. I got into it for the job, said McBride, who's held the position since 2007. Talk about a long streak of elected office holders. Brandon, your top three, you're going to talk about a guy who's been county executive since the early 2000s. But for now, let's not forget that this leaves Tricia's state rep seat open. And there's some good news for conservatives / libertarians, folks on the right. Former state rep Tony Lovasco, a Republican who lists Wentzville as his home, has formed a campaign committee to run for the post. And you'll recall, Brad, that Tony was defeated in the 2024 GOP primary by challenger Deanna Self, a licensed professional counselor from St. Paul, who previously chaired the St. Charles County chapter of Missouri Right to Life. So Tony making a comeback in politics. Now, a Democrat, Erickson notes that a Democrat is claiming that he'll run, and the Democrat out there will, of course, be a non-factor. But we could see a return of Tony Lovasco to the state legislature.
Okay, so she resigned already? Is that what you're saying? She's
No, she'll fill out the rest of her term. I mean, she'll serve next year as well. Yeah, she's not actually leaving office early. She's just announcing that she's not running for re-election.
And how many terms has she already been in?
This is her 2nd term.
So she could do another 2 more if she wanted, correct?
That's correct, yep.
Yeah. I know why.
Why is that, Brad?
Well, she got into a little fight with Adam Schnelting.
Oh, wait a minute. Did it have to do with elder abuse?
No.
Getting on the radio every morning from 7 to 8, Monday through Friday, and beating up Brad?
No, she was driving down to Jefferson City, and she was doing 90, and some guy, she's in the left lane, she was a couple miles away from Kingdom City, and some guy in back of her was flashing his lights and honking his horn, and she pulled over, and the guy went by her and yelled at her, and she said, that's Adam Schnelting. And because, once again, don't be doing under 100 miles an hour in the left lane going to Jefferson City, and she was so upset about that, she said, I'm not ever doing this again. So she just decided that she was just going to stay in St. Charles County.
It's a weekly reminder to St. Charles County candidates that if you had only tossed a couple grand to Brad Hildebrand 5 years ago, he wouldn't be making fun of you on the air.
John, I'm not making fun of people on the air. I just find it interesting that so many of the legislators on local level, state level, federal level, they have their axe to grind, and they take it to legislation. And you go like, okay, of all the problems in the world, why are we talking about this? Get what I'm saying?
I don't know, Brad. I do know there's a headline up today that Wesley Bell is taking on the shaving requirements in the military.
I saw that. I thought to myself, OMG. And John, do we dare touch on one of the reasons he's bringing that up? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Does it have to do with how women groom themselves?
No, it has to do with black men, and apparently the skin is different, and it gets more.
Yeah, they get a lot of bumps, and you can buy gimmick cream and rub it on your beard area,
right?
And whatever.
Your skin is different, and you.
It has to do with having kinky hair, right?
Well, it has. You have trouble shaving, is what it comes down to. White people, white dudes don't have trouble shaving, but see, the crazy thing about this is, I'm like peak Hegseth. I'm going like, dude, man, I'm with you. You know, I mean, the guys, and I believe in some of the branches of the service, you can have a mustache, but I think you can still have a mustache in the Navy, but you can't have, for a long time, you couldn't have a beard. You know, I mean, to me, it's like, okay, I mean, they're grooming standards, okay? It's just like, I still can't get over the fact that when you see the police videos all the time, now you see these guys with the big old beards. Used to be, God, I remember in my day, one of the guys I worked with who applied for Illinois State Police, I worked for a police department over in Illinois, and he applied for Illinois State Police, and the first thing they did was he sat down, they said, roll your sleeves up to your elbow.
And what were they checking for, Brad?
Tattoos, and he had one, and he was out.
And now when you watch body cams, what does every police officer have?
They're all tatted up.
Generally, they are, right?
They're all tatted up. It's like, boy, how things change. Okay, it's time for us to take a break. It's time for us to play some commercials, and we'll be back with the B block, which is Brad's block.